I'm Tom Green, and I'm ready to start digging deep.
I'm Mark Sutcliffe. Welcome to Digging Deep, presented by Zen Books. Digging Deep is a series of one-on-one conversations. I chat with thoughtful, accomplished people in many different fields: entertainment, media, music, business, even space exploration. It's all about hearing people's life stories and the powerful lessons, the valuable observations, and the unique perspectives that they can share with us, things that we can apply to our lives. And here's how we do it. We start off with some rapid-fire questions that reveal little pieces of information about the guest. We have some fun with that. And then we start digging deep with a free-flowing discussion into those stories and life lessons. Our guest today is the one and only Tom Green. Tom Green has had a remarkable career as a bunch of different things: a comedian, actor, filmmaker, rapper, talk show host, and podcaster. From his pioneering talk show on cable television in Ottawa, Tom went on to stardom in the United States. He had his own MTV show. He ended up hosting Saturday Night Live. He guest hosted for David Letterman. And he directed a movie that has become a cult classic, Freddy Got Fingered. Until the coronavirus pandemic, Tom was touring as a stand-up comedian and was hosting his own podcast, which he continues to do to this day. There are a lot of great lessons in this discussion, including about the huge risk of not trying, about how to absorb setbacks, about mitigating pressure, about expanding your range. We also talk about the moment that Tom realized he made it in show business, what he's learned over the course of a very long career, a lot of adapting in his career, why he loves stand-up comedy, how his television special about his cancer treatment changed the lives of others, his life in quarantine, and his plan to start driving across America shortly after we recorded this episode. Now, one last thing before we get started. If you like what you hear, then please post a review on iTunes or anywhere else and share this podcast with people you know, and subscribe to it. And if you're looking for more information about the show, if you want to read my daily blog, where I post short observations for leaders and entrepreneurs and CEOs every single day of the year, or if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, The Weekly Dig, which has 5 very quick items I've learned about each week, then please go to our website. It's letsdigdeep.com, letsdigdeep.com. You can also find a link there to my TEDx talk. Now, let's start digging deep with Tom Green. All right, Tom, it's great to talk to you again. Welcome to
talk to you, Mark.
It's great to chat with you, and I'm really glad you've agreed to do this. I have a lot of respect for what you've done in your career, and I have laughed uproariously at many of the things that you've done. I have seen your stand-up comedy, and of course, you and I have very similar roots in cable television in Ottawa. Although the directions we went from there are quite different from each other.
Yeah. That's the coffee pot I was telling you about right before the kettle, I guess is what it is.
Yeah, nice.
The kettle's boiling. I'm getting my coffee. I'm making my coffee for the interview, Mark. I want to have a lot of caffeinated energy for you, you know? So
that's nice.
I make my coffee pour over is how I've been making it. I was using French press, but then it started sounding too fancy. No, actually, I like using a filter when I make coffee, and the French press doesn't have a filter because apparently it's better for you to filter your coffee. But I pour it through a filter, and that's how I make my coffee, and that's what I'm doing now. Cool. So
okay,
let's go. Now we just told everybody how to make coffee, which I'm sure people are excited and riveted by.
All right, so let's start with some rapid fire questions, beginning with, what is your fondest childhood memory?
My very, very, very fondest ever childhood memory. My very, very fondest. Well, you know, I used to love going to my cottage when I was a kid. I mean, are we defining childhood before the age of 10?
Sure.
Okay, so if we're going before the age of 10, I would say would be going to my cottage. We used to have a cottage up on Lower Beverly Lake up in near Lyndhurst, Ontario. And my mother and father and my brother and I would go up there every summer, and then we'd go out there on weekends a lot. And I'd go fishing with my dad, and I'd, catch frogs and snakes, and really became quite interested in outdoor life and fishing and animals and the sort of being out in the woods. And so I loved that. And I remember one time I caught a real nice sized largemouth bass at night with my dad. We were out in the canoe, actually, along the edge of the lake, and I caught this great, I think it was a 4-pound largemouth, and on a floating lure. I was using I think it was a Rapala or a jitterbug or one of these floating lures, and this thing hit it, and it was amazing. And the line got all tangled up, and it was dark, so we took the canoe into shore and got everything sorted out, and thought, well, let's go back out and see if we can catch one more. And it was like one of those nights where I was up late. I wasn't supposed to be up. It wasn't normally up that late. It was probably 9 o'clock at night or something like that, but it was dark. It was and it felt kind of like I was staying up past my bedtime. And we went back out. The first cast, I caught another 4-pounder in the exact same spot. It was an unbelievable night of fishing, and I was with my dad, and we were having a lot of fun. And so that was probably a very fond memory for sure.
It's a beautiful memory.
I have a lot of great memories, though. I feel like I had a really good childhood. My dad was Canadian Army captain, and we moved around a lot. I didn't move to Ottawa till I was about 7 years old. So we lived in CFB Petawawa and moved around in Quebec, in Saint Jean and Saint Hubert, Quebec, and the base there. So lots of good memories.
Who was your hero when you were 10 years old?
When I was 10 years old, I probably didn't really know the concept of a hero. I don't know. I loved watching. I really was when I was a little older where I really became more aware of celebrity and comedy and all of that stuff. So if I was to think about my heroes when I was a kid, I would think about David Letterman and Tony Hawk probably. But I was a little older then. I was probably 14 and 15 years old when I discovered those guys.
And what did you think you were going to be when you grew up? When you were at school age, like what was your vision for that?
Believe it or not, I actually wanted to do exactly what I ended up doing. I wanted to be a comedian, and I wanted to work in television. And I knew that probably when I was in the 6th grade, when I went in for a public speaking assignment. I did a speech on comedy, and what comedy was, how comedy worked. And I ended up winning the speech competition for the school, and went off and competed in the regional finals, and was up on stage in front of the class and getting laughs. And I felt like, wow, I like this feeling. I like being on stage doing stand-up, or it wasn't stand-up, but making people laugh. And eventually led to me doing stand-up when I was about 15 at Yuck Yucks in Ottawa. 15 or 16, I started doing stand-up at Yuck Yucks in Ottawa, and it was an amazing time. Yuck Yucks was always so supportive of me as a kid. They called me Little Tommy Green from down the street. And Howard Wagman, who still owns Yuck Yucks in Ottawa, and Mark Breslin were always very supportive of what I did.
What's your life story in 6 words?
What the hell is going on?
That's a very good one. For what do you feel most grateful?
Well, I'm very grateful that things worked out, because there was a long time where I was, trying to do comedy, and it was always sort of considered to be something that was kind of not a realistic career path. I didn't really make any money doing comedy until I was 28 years old, maybe 27. I'd done all sorts of things in Ottawa. It started out my rap group, Organized Rhyme, and we got nominated for a Juno, but we didn't make any money. I was 19 years old when I did that. And before that, I was doing stand-up and did college radio at CHUO, and I worked at various radio stations around Ottawa doing late night engineering and overnight sort of, volunteering and all these things. I just wanted to work in broadcasting or in comedy in some way. But it was a long time before I ever really actually felt like I had any sort of stability and it was really, when you're 28 years old, that's pretty old. Most of my friends were had careers at that point, and they were, on with their life. And I was volunteering at Rogers Cable and, editing, and I'd gone to Algonquin College for broadcasting, but it was touch and go there, And then when MTV picked up the show, and when I was 28, that was when things really kind of, all of a sudden I was thrust into the sort of the international stage, and I was fortunate enough to have been successful enough to have, been able to have some stability in my life. And I guess now I just sort of say to myself, I'm just really happy and grateful that I get to keep doing what I do. And, I'm very grateful for that. The last 10 years I've been touring as a stand-up all over the world. Not now because of the pandemic, of course, but I'm doing what I love. So
good for you. What would you say has been the best year of your life so far, and why?
Well, I almost would hate to say, this, because it's been a horrible year, but and we're going through a tough time in our world right now with the pandemic and everything. So it almost would sound wrong to say this year, but I really am, pandemic aside, the fact that myself and everyone else, we're not working right now. But just on a personal and a spiritual and emotional level, I'd say this is probably the best year of my life. And, because I feel like I've really found, myself, a nice centered place with where I am. And I think as you get older, I've always been very driven, and as far as and passionate about my career, but sometimes I push myself a little bit too hard. And this has been a strange year, of course, but I've been, forced to, sort of sit at home alone. I'm currently single right now, which just sort of was a kind of newly single right before the pandemic started. And so I found myself in this strange situation where I'm isolating alone, and I'm learning to play the piano, and I'm slowing down my sort of the anxiety and stress pressure that I put on myself has kind of been lifted for the first time in my life because there's nothing we can really do. And so that's been interesting. I know it probably sounds strange to say, because I had such incredible years in my career where, I got to host Saturday Night Live, and I had that incredible run where I got picked up by MTV and made movie after movie after movie. And it was an exciting, thrilling time, but there was so much pressure on me in those years that I can't really say that those were the years where I was the happiest, And I kind of think like, okay, well, I actually like getting older. The older I get, the more calm I find myself. I used to be under so much pressure, or put so much pressure on myself when I was in my 20s and 30s, because I was worried about, what's going to happen, if I screw this up, what's going to happen to my future. But now I'm 49 years old, and there's just so much less of my future to ruin. So really, the pressure's off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's been the toughest year of your life so far?
I'd say it was the year that I got cancer when I was 29 years old, or 28, 29 years old. Would have been probably the year 2000. And I just because it was physically pressure, it was actual worrying about the possibility of dying, and it was very real possibility. And I had very, very invasive, physically painful surgery, the lymph node dissection, where they cut my abdomen open and removed lymph nodes from the back of my spine, and it was a very, very painful, scary ordeal. So that was probably, and then that was right in the middle of all the exciting stuff that was happening too. So I guess that's part of the reason, actually, to sort of ties with my last question, why maybe 1999, 2000 probably wasn't the best year of my life, because although I had all these great things happening, I also had cancer, and I had to deal with that at the exact same time. So yeah, it really kind of set me back a bit,
What one person would you say has had the greatest impact on your life?
It's a really hard question to answer, because I've got so many great friends. I've got great family, personal friendships, and family that is really probably the most meaningful thing in my life. And then from a professional show business perspective, I look at people that I look up to and I'm inspired by. And I think that, like I mentioned, David Letterman, I grew up, idolizing him, and he really opened my mind up to comedy and television, and made me start thinking about, television in a different way. But then I look at my parents, who have given me such a great, supportive world, that they created such a supportive environment for me. And they didn't just let me run around and do whatever the hell I wanted to do. I mean, they put rules, and they made me aware that I needed to work. And so I might say my parents would probably be had the biggest influence, for sure, which makes sense, because I was living with them my whole life. But they could have been bad parents. They could have been parents that didn't care what I was doing or didn't support what I was doing, and they weren't. They were really supportive. I remember when I was 16 years old, or maybe it was 17, I was doing stand-up at Yuck Yucks, and then we got the opportunity to go to New York City and record some music, because I'd been recording music with Organized Rhyme, my band, and a producer heard us rapping in Ottawa. Kevin Bradley was his name, and he'd heard us rapping, and he was from New York, and he wanted us to come down and record with his brother, and there was some costs involved, and it was really kind of out of reach, and all of our parents in the band, Greg Campbell and Brian Boswell and myself, all Ottawa boys there, our parents stepped up and supported us and gave us a few bucks to let us go down to New York City for the summer and record. So if we didn't have that kind of, backing, that kind of support system, we wouldn't have been able to do that. And that really launched us into sort of a place where we ended up getting a record deal, and that kind of set us off on our path,
What's the most important lesson that you've learned in your life that you'd want to share with other people?
I think when you're young, you can be so, cocksure of yourself, so confident in what you're doing. And I think some of that comes from youthful sort of enthusiasm and energy, but then some of it also comes from a naivety or a lack of awareness or understanding. And so, sometimes I think if I wasn't naive when I was in my 20s to the way the world worked, I never would have been able to accomplish a lot of the things I accomplished, because you're able to have the confidence to do things that might actually be impossible, but you don't know that. So you go do things and you make mistakes. And so, I sometimes think if I had the knowledge I have now and the perspective I have now, I might never have accomplished any of the things that I got to do, because I would have been too afraid to try them, because I would have known that there would have been, oh, you probably shouldn't do that. But I think that, that being said, maybe my advice would be wrong. I don't like to say to young people, hey, you should really, listen to other people. right? And you're not always right about everything, because if somebody listened to that, they might not make the mistakes that they're supposed to make, that they would grow from and learn from. So, so that's kind of a non-answer, but I do think that I do sometimes think about when I was in my 20s and making the Tom Green show and doing these crazy, outrageous things and pushing the envelope. Sometimes I think, oh, geez, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I'd, been a little more reserved or listened to people around me more. And maybe this might not have happened, or this might not have happened. But then if I had done that, probably a lot of other good things wouldn't have happened. So I guess maybe try not to have too many regrets. Try to, but try to listen to others as well. I think like the best thing that I could say is like I as I've gotten older, I've learned to really take my time when making big decisions. I don't just go with my first instinct, but I'm also aware that instinct is there. I listen to it, and then I take time to weigh every possible outcome and really analyze what I'm supposed to do before doing it, because, I've screwed up a lot in my life too, Mark, and I've learned from that. So I kind of know how to not, I'm sort of gotten to the point where I've learned to not repeat some of those mistakes, but I'm glad that I didn't know what I know now when I was a kid, to be honest with you. I almost don't want to tell young people what I've learned because it might mess them up,
Yeah, that's a good point. What would people be most surprised to learn about you?
Probably everything that I just said, that I actually think about what I'm doing before I do it, that there's some sort of plan, because a lot of the craziness of my comedy, especially, is really kind of seems really random and ridiculous and off the cuff and outrageous, but it's always been very planned out, It's been a organized confusion to it all, right? It's, I was always very aware that that media and comedy is a business, and even at a young age, I could see that things were very structured, and I, for whatever reason, was able to kind of see through that. And even when I watched some of the biggest comedy shows on television, not taking anything away from them, but even as a kid or as a teenager, I could see that it was a structured thing, that there was some rhyme and reason to it, and that to me was something that I thought that I wanted to kind of try to mess with, So, yeah.
Tom, thank you for answering those questions. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll start digging deep. We're just going to take a quick break so I can tell you a little bit more about the presenting sponsor of Digging Deep, ZenBooks. ZenBooks is Canada's go-to cloud accounting firm. They are not your typical accounting firm. I know the founders, Colin and Eric. I've worked with them for several years. And here's why I think you should consider working with them too. First of all, they bring a fresh, unique, modern approach to what is a very old-fashioned industry. These guys were working remotely and in the cloud long before it became cool. ZenBooks also uses technology to your advantage. I think this is really important. They give you the tools and analysis you need to monitor your business in real time. That's so valuable right now when everything changes so quickly. Yes, they're a virtual accounting firm, but that doesn't mean they're offshore, and it doesn't mean they're inattentive. ZenBooks combines the efficiency and effectiveness of a cloud accounting service with all the benefits that you'd want from a trusted advisor, high-level advice, and strategic support. Now, here's what I think is going to happen if you work with ZenBooks. You'll probably start out taking advantage of their cutting-edge cloud accounting solutions, but in the long run, I think you'll stay with them because of their strategic guidance and problem solving. Among their core values, they specifically list being candid and proactive. Isn't that exactly what you want from a trusted advisor? Look, even if you're already working with an accountant or a bookkeeper, or you have some accounting staff on your team, I think you should still talk to ZenBooks and learn more about their tools and their expertise. Check out ZenBooks at zenbooks.ca. That's zenbooks.ca. So, Tom, let's start digging deep. And I wanted to start by asking you about your relationship with your parents, because in the early days of your comedy, they were the brunt of a lot of your humor. You did a lot of crazy things to your dad's car, you painted their house, you did all these things. And I think a lot of people had curiosity about, what kind of relationship you had with your parents and how that's changed over time.
Well, like I said in the first sort of section of the interview, my parents were always very supportive of me. So even though I decided to kind of turn the camera around on them and start pulling these pranks on them, barging into their bedroom in the middle of the night or painting the house plaid or all these outrageous things, like I kind of knew that we had this funny rapport, like my dad's a really funny guy, my mom's funny, and my dad's a bit more goofy funny, and my mother's kind of very, very savvy funny. And so like combined, it kind of creates a funny dynamic in our household because, around the dinner table or whatever, there was always a lot of funny sort of give and take. My dad would say something ridiculous and silly. My mother would kind of like, roll her eyes and say something kind of sarcastic back. I'd be in the middle, running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and everybody would be kind of like, having a laugh. But so I kind of knew that when I pulled these pranks on my parents, there was going to be some kind of an energy that we would capture, and that's why that the stuff worked. It wasn't just like they didn't just get angry at me and shut down. My dad would say something hilarious. My mom would say something hilarious. They were big characters in the show, So sometimes people come up to me and they say, "Oh my gosh, your poor parents, they really must have had a tough time, with all those pranks you did." But they don't understand that aspect of it. And, they also don't really understand the fact that, the show really lasted 3 years tops. And then ever since then, my parents, have not had to worry about me. I've become successful financially. We, I'll go down to, nice vacations together and things like that, and everything's fine. So my parents and I have a real great relationship now, and we spend a lot of time together. I'm very close with them, and because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to get on a plane for the last 4 months. Normally I would be seeing them a lot more often than that. So I'm actually, because of my close family relationship I have, and I'm in Los Angeles now, I've actually kind of been forced to think out of the box, and I'm actually in the middle of getting ready to take off on this really incredible journey. I'm now buying my own camper van, and I'm going to be converting it into a podcast studio, and I'm going to be taking my time. I'm going to drive from Los Angeles to Ottawa starting next month, and so I can come up and see my family and my friends and come home, and maybe come up and spend some time in Canada for a little while. I've been isolating here. I actually have not been in a room with another human being in pretty much 3 months. So I'm probably the most COVID-free person in the world. I have a lot of friends I talk to on social media and on video and all that stuff, but it is getting a little bit prolonged down here. So I think I'm going to come home and quarantine with my family in Ottawa.
So what's going to be the mission en route to Ottawa? What are you going to be capturing as you travel across America with this podcast studio and a van?
Well, I'm going to be doing my podcast every week, which will be a lot of fun. I've been recording this podcast since I've been in quarantine here, and I'm going to continue that. I'm also building a recording studio in the van, so I'm going to be making music and recording an album as I go, and filming video for my social media, for my Instagram. And I'm sort of I like making films, and I like to shoot, video and film, and I'll be essentially recording and documenting the entire journey and editing it as I go. The van that I'm putting together is really pretty incredible. It's got really high-tech battery and solar power abilities. So I'm going to be able to go off-grid, and I'll be able to go park this thing in the middle of Yellowstone National Park, not in an RV park, just off-grid, and I'll have electricity for up to a week without starting the engine to run all my computers and camera equipment and charge my batteries and run my refrigerator and my stuff. And I'll be cooking on either a campfire, or if there's no campfires, then on a gas stove, and really kind of camping it out as I go. Not planning on staying in any hotels the entire trip, not checking into one hotel. I'm not going to be eating in any restaurants. I'm very careful. Like I said, I'm isolating. And really the only time I will ever touch probably any other thing that a human being has touched will be a gas pump. And I have my gloves and my sanitizers and stuff. So like I said, I'm being very careful. And then when I get to Ottawa, I'm going to quarantine for the 14 days anyways, even though I know that I'm doing that because, of course, I'm legally required to do it, and also because I want to do it anyways. I've been quarantining for 4 months, so I'm fine with another 2 weeks.
Sure. So you touched on this a little bit before, but there's great risk in what you did in your career. Obviously, you took a leap and you went for it. You moved to the United States. You took on these big projects, and the kind of comedy you do, and comedy in general, of course, is very risky. You're getting up on stage. Maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't. You do some stunt, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. What's it like for you, sort of living on the edge of that risk, and what have you learned from that?
Well, it's exciting. It's exciting when you do comedy. Getting up on stage in front of an audience, which I've been doing for 30 years now plus, is the most thrilling, exciting thing that that you ever get to do as a human being. For me, I love it. It's an adrenaline rush. It can go wrong if you're, especially when you're starting out. It doesn't really go wrong that much for me anymore, if ever. Actually, I don't really think I've had a bad set probably. And you have some sets that are better than others, but it's sort of at this point now, it's a little less risky, I guess. It's various levels of murdering it, Mark, is what happens when I do stand-up now. It's like, oh, that was a 12 on 10 set as opposed to an 11. But, I'm confident. You need to be confident, Mark. You do. But when you're starting, though, it's not like that. When you're the first 10 years of doing stand-up, you can probably have a bad set, and that's sort of exhilarating because you never know whether you're going to bomb or not, which is also thrilling. It's more fun when you never bomb, though. I can tell you for sure. It's definitely more fun when you never bomb. But so that's exciting, though, not knowing what's going to happen, knowing that, there's people there looking at you. And if you fall there, it's going to be embarrassing. And also the challenge of putting it together and the adrenaline rush that you get from it. So but like I never looked at it as risky because, like the idea, like the overall global idea of trying to pursue the path of being a comedian, I never looked at it as risky because for me, the risk would have been not trying, because I just would have never been able to imagine, personally, I could not have imagined doing anything else with my life. So for me, the risk was not trying, not throwing myself into it, and then getting into a place where I was not able to do what I loved and I wasn't happy. That was the big risk. But I know what you're saying. Like, there's various degrees of pushing the envelope, and I kind of realized at a young age that you would slowly kind of learn things slowly. You would do something. Like I said, in the 6th grade, I got a big laugh on stage when I gave my speech, and I said, "Oh, that worked." I said a line that got a huge laugh, and it was unexpected, and everybody laughed, and I had all these kids coming up to me in the schoolyard, and they liked what I said. Oh, that worked. Oh, and then and you start to learn. Okay, let's build on that. Let's try that again. And oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's not do that again. Let's do this again. And so it's not as risky as it seems, because you kind of like are building upon little blocks as you go along the way, and figuring it out as you go along.
That's a great point. You become a master of your craft, right? And you have all this knowledge you've accumulated one set at a time, right?
Yeah, and then for me, I always like to try new things. So because at a certain point, like first of all, like comedy evolves, like and changes over time. A big part of comedy is the element of surprise, right? So you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, or it's not going to work. So, when I started the Tom Green Show on Rogers Cable, like this was before reality TV, it was before all the prank shows that we see, it was before the internet. So nobody had seen anybody pulling a prank on their parents before. It was before the Osbournes and Jackass and the Kardashians and all of this stuff. So nobody had seen families disintegrating on television before their eyes. I like to think I started that, but so no, like, I mean, it was kind of like, it was thrilling and shocking and exciting and surprising. But, now if I were to go out right today and go, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go pull another prank on my parents. Well, it wouldn't be funny, right? Because, there's enough people online doing it. So, you can go watch people online on TikTok or on YouTube pulling pranks on their parents. And that's going to be funny to young people, because young people are inspired by their peers. So if you're 16 years old, you're going to love watching a 20-something-year-old, YouTuber go pull a prank, because you kind of envision yourself doing that. But you're not necessarily going to want to see a 49-year-old guy go pull a prank on his 80-year-old parents. That's not really, that doesn't work. So you have to keep changing things up and adapting. And, now with my stand-up, I love to talk about subjects that are interesting to everybody. And a lot of young people, I mean, I have a very strong fan base of young people, but they're seeing me talking about things, and they're seeing me do things that are more appropriate for me as a 49-year-old guy to be doing, That's the fun thing about my stand-up shows, Come to my stand-up show and you'll have people in their 20s, you'll have people in their 40s at my show. And it's a really broad audience. And sometimes I'll have people in their 20s come to my show, and they'll be there because they love my stand-up or my podcast. And I'll be talking to them, and I'll realize they've never even heard of the Tom Green Show. They don't even know about the pranks that I pulled on my parents. And I go, what? Go look at my YouTube channel. They're like, oh, no, I'm here because of the podcast or whatever. So it's interesting. It's pretty cool.
Well, what you're describing here, I think, is innovation, right? And that's something that people in your business have to do, but it also applies very broadly. So do you have a process for that? I mean, how do you stay ahead? How do you stay current? How do you innovate in a world that is rapidly changing?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's not for everybody, I don't like to talk about this this is how you do it and you should do it, because it's not for everybody. I mean, you got to be a certain kind of person that you want to live sort of a life that is, there's no defined path. I have to get up every morning. I get up, I make a point to go to bed early so I can wake up every morning pretty much right before the sun rises. I make my coffee. I don't like to sleep until noon, because then you've lost half the day. And I get up and I write, I have notepads all around the house. This one happens to be blank, but There are some that I've written stuff on, but I've pads everywhere in the house. I have pens everywhere in the house. If you look around, I can show you. I mean, there's pads everywhere, with, notes. So if I think of something, I just write it down right away. And then, I have an organized process where I go around and I'll have a certain time each week, where I'll sit down and I'll go through all the pads and I'll reorganize all the ideas, and I'll think, okay, which of these is still funny to me, and some of them are big ideas like, hey, I should start a podcast again, and some of their little ideas like, hey, here's a funny joke about cheese, right? So like, and so you kind of put them all, and then I organize them all into little categories on my computer, files. Okay, stand-up comedy jokes, show ideas, et cetera, and then you go through it and you organize it all. So a lot of it's technical too. I'm building a studio out back. I've got camera lenses I'm into, and lights, and there's new technology, new kinds of microphones that I'm always researching and learning about that I can plug into my phone and do social media with. And I'm a bit of a techie. I did go to Algonquin, I studied broadcasting at Algonquin. So I'm into microphones and latest tech and video and cameras. So like, and I love all that stuff, but it requires like, getting up in the morning. I don't have a boss telling me what to do. I've got to come up with what I'm going to do on my own, and figure out how to run it as a business, and how to make money doing it so that I can keep doing it. And it's all a whole thing. But, sometimes I think we're living in this weird world now where sort of creative people in the media, like yourself and like myself and others, visualize the world as this place where you can do anything you want. You just got to go do it, right? Well, that's the way we think, right? But that's not the way a lot of people think. And so I don't like to talk about it like, hey, this is what you should do, because some people really aren't cut out for that. Some people, would rather work at a job where they have a thing to do that they know how to do well, and they do it well every day, and then they get off work at the end of the day and they can actually go home and relax, we are living in a world now where there's less and less of that. So it is important for people to understand that it is possible to kind of do whatever you want to do, but it's also possible to not do that. You don't have to live life like that. You could decide that I want to, like one of the big things right now that I would say, like if I was not a person that wanted to run my own business doing creative stuff, I would get into computer engineering, right? Because there's going to be so much, if you were like, sort of like I say, I'd like to maybe like, I don't know what brain personality type I am, but I'm the kind of person that likes to create and build and do all of these out of the box things. But if I was somebody that was more of a insular kind of person that wanted to sort of stay home and write or work on something that was more organized, I would get into computers, because that's going to be a major changing thing in our world. It is now, and it's going to continue. If you could write code, I could never do that because I'm not good at math and things like that. But if I was that type of personality, I would learn how to write code so I could have a nice structure in my life. And so that's kind of, I guess I'm just saying that because I don't like to, I get asked this question sometimes, and I feel like it's almost like it would be an impossible task for certain types of people who don't think
Sure.
like that, who are not creative type of people, to go, well, how would you do that? Write down jokes, jokes so that you can then organize them in a pad and then go get on stage in front of a bunch of people. That's not for everybody,
Yeah. So I want to talk about a couple of other things from your story, and one of them is that moment where you get picked up in the United States. You do the show on MTV. That leads to you eventually guest hosting for David Letterman, who, as you mentioned, was one of your heroes growing up. You hosted Saturday Night Live. You were on the cover of Rolling Stone at one point, I think. Was there a moment when you realized, you know what, I've actually made it, and here you are as a Canadian making it in American show business? What was that journey like, and was there a milestone for you that really made you feel like you'd made it?
Yeah, all of those things that you mentioned were definitely moments like that. Hosting Saturday Night Live, being a guest on Letterman, and seeing my face on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. Those were probably, you listed them all. Those three were real, like, pinch me moments. The first of those things was being a guest on Letterman. So that was the moment where I said to myself, wow, I made it. I'm a guest on Letterman. I remember when I was a kid doing the show on Rogers, I had a guest on the show. I don't remember his name. We had a lot of local guests, but a guest on the show, and he did something with a bow and arrow. I forget exactly what it was, but I think he caught an arrow in his mouth or something like that. It was really crazy stunt that he did. And I remember I had him as a guest on my show. And I remember he wanted to get on Letterman, and he sent his appearance on my show to the Letterman show. And the Letterman show saw it and booked him on Letterman. And I remember Letterman, I wish I could remember this guy's name. And I remember Letterman had him on. I remember watching that, amazed. This was probably 4 years before my show got picked up by MTV and before I was on Letterman. I remember Letterman made a comment about the Rideau Canal. Oh, you got the Rideau Canal up there in Ottawa. And I remember just sitting there just so thrilled that I had 1 degree of separation between me and Dave. And it was a guy had come on my show, and maybe Dave had seen my show. And, I was so happy for this guy who caught the arrow in his mouth and all of this stuff. And so, David Letterman was the biggest thing for me. It was the most thrilling and exciting thing to sort of someday do a show like that. I was very much modeling the Tom Green Show after that. I'm sure that would be, it was the desk and the going out on the street and all of that stuff. We took the street stuff into a bit more of a different place, but it was definitely the starting point was Letterman, So when I heard that I was booked on Letterman, which was the first American talk show that I got booked on, and I walked out on stage for the very first time, that was like a everything stood still kind of moment for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. And you mentioned your cancer journey 20 years ago now, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah.
And you did a television special about it.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, the cancer special. Everybody should go watch that. Everybody should.
Yeah. What was the motivation for doing that? Because that, when I see you now and knowing the comedy you used to do and the comedy you do now, there was something that was, I think there was something about that foreshadowed kind of where you were going in the future, because you took a topic and of course you dealt with it using some of your trademark humor, but you also had a serious kind of aspect to it as well that I think is reflected in where you've taken your career since then.
Yeah, well, first of all, Mark, we just moved the show to Los Angeles. I'd been doing it in New York City on MTV for about a year, and we had just moved the show to Los Angeles before I got cancer, before I got the diagnosis. The whole staff of the show moved. People gave up apartments in New York City, which was a big deal, and the show was a hit. And we came out to LA, and probably about 2 months after we got here, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I had to quit the show. And, we knew I had to quit the show because it was going to be about a year-long ordeal, dealing with this. And so partially out of, a way of keeping the show going for another month or so to give people on the staff a little bit of a cushion, also partially out of the fact that I realized that it could actually help people, which it turned out it has. I've had hundreds and hundreds. I would even venture to say not thousands, but probably not close to 1,000 people have probably reached out to me and in one way or another said that they have been affected by that special directly. Hundreds and hundreds of testicular cancer survivors who have said to me that the reason they went to the doctor was because they saw that special, and that they're alive today because of that special. Kids that were, I mean, I'm telling you, like, I'm not exaggerating. I tour, do stand up around the world, and it's probably once a week somebody comes up to me, and sometimes with tears in their eyes, with their wife standing at their side or their mother saying, you know, Tom, the reason that I went to the hospital when I was 22 years old was because I saw your song, "Hey Kids, Feel Your Balls So You Don't Get Cancer." I had testicular cancer, right? So, you know, when you're 15 years old or 16 years old and you get sore testicle, you're embarrassed. You don't want to go to the doctor. And so you wait. And often people wait far too long, and the cancer spreads and they die. So because MTV and my audience specifically was, you know, appealed to a lot of young guys, you know, a lot of, you know, teenage boys were watching the show on MTV, and young boys were watching the show on MTV. And so it really, really resonated and went into that audience. And I've, you know, been involved with testicular cancer charities and raised money for testicular cancer since over the last 20 years. And that was a thought that when we decided to do the show, we thought, well, maybe this could help. And it turns out it really, really did. And then, you know, the other thing was, and honestly, I'd be lying if I didn't say this wasn't the main reason, but, you know, I was so focused on doing the TV show. I mean, I had been doing this now for years, and finally we had this hit show, and I didn't want to stop the show, you know? And I just thought, well, we've got to film this, because we filmed everything, you know, like it was like, you know, this is going to be, you know, crazy, you know. And if you watch the cancer special, it's on YouTube. Search the Tom Green Cancer Special. It's really kind of a pretty heavy, funny, but sort of moving at times episode. It's very different than anything we ever did. You know, my mother and father were there, and we were very scared, and I'm making jokes through it, and I watch it now in hindsight, and I go, wow, look, you can see that I'm scared, but you can see that I'm trying to make, you know, comedy out of this scary situation. And you know, I really proud of that episode, and it continues to help people. I still get, you know, like I said, at my stand-up shows, and I also have people reach out to me on social media. And anytime anybody ever reaches out to me in social media with a health-related question, especially cancer and especially testicular cancer-related question, I always engage with them and give them my advice. And my advice is always go to a doctor. Go to a doctor tomorrow. It's funny how, you know, people are afraid to go to the doctor. I'll get an email from somebody who thinks they have testicular cancer, and they're asking me what they should do. They haven't gone to a doctor yet. Go to a doctor right away. Don't wait. Save your life.
I think that special had an extraordinary impact. I'm not surprised to hear how many people have given you that feedback. I wanted to ask you, Tom, about this. I'm going to describe it as a second phase of your career. I'm not sure if that's the right way to describe it, but it feels like you have had this sort of terrific kind of second act in your life. And not everybody gets that, especially in show business. You had a very, as you alluded to earlier, a very sort of youthful style of comedy at one point, very, very visual humor. And now you've got this much more mature stand-up act, which I've seen. How were you able to make that?
Let's not use the word mature in a way where it sounds like it's boring.
No, of course not. Of course
like
not.
It's outrageous, right? The show's still outrageous.
But it's thoughtful, right? It's you.
I like that. I like thoughtful.
Yeah, thoughtful. There you go.
But still hilarious, right?
And yeah, absolutely. Because
I sometimes because people say that a lot now, because, you know, I am inspired by, you know, great comedians like George Carlin, who talked about, you know, society and was very philosophical, and these are the people that inspire me. I'm not getting up on stage and doing sort of just straight up slapstick comedy, but I do bring a lot of energy into my show and a lot of silliness into my show also, which I think is something that Carlin also did, but I think I get even a little more physical and maybe a little weirder than he did, so I like, when you say sort of it's mature, I worry sometimes, because people say this sometimes. I worry that people think that might imply not funny, but you know, when you go to my show, right, people are laughing probably harder than you've ever seen a group of people laugh in their entire lives, right?
I have the greatest respect for you, so I would never.
But I just want the audience to understand that it's massive, high energy, destructive comedy, right?
It's your version of grown-up comedy in a way, right?
But not grown up in the way that people are not like literally, curled over in a ball in the aisles because they can't stop laughing, right?
What I would say though, and I think this is I mean this as the
mature makes it sound like I'm Marshall McLuhan or something up there on stage.
I haven't heard that comparison out there, Tom. I've not heard that comparison.
Good. I love Marshall McLuhan.
You're both great Canadians. You're both great Canadians. I have
his book right here. I just ordered it on Amazon. Understanding Media, right there. I'm reading it right now. So there you go. That's why I used that reference. Yeah. Okay.
But you don't go for the easy laugh either, right? So that's something I respect. There is a form of comedy where you drop a swear word here, you do, you go for the trope, and I don't think, I think your humor is very well developed, right? Like it's not cheap humor. So
thank you. Well, I appreciate you telling everyone in your audience that, because I want people to know that.
Yeah. So how did you make that transition? Because as I say, there are a lot of people who have success in their 20s in comedy and in Hollywood and who are not doing what you're doing at 49.
Well, I would say that the first trick is to not quit. And a lot of people, when they have success early and then it goes away, they quit. And I did not quit because I did not want to do anything else. So I certainly had periods in my life where I had second guessed myself or worried, is this over? Had movies fail and and you can kind of roll up in a ball and give up, or you can go, well, you know what are we going to do now, and get up and keep going. And I decided, at one point I decided, well, I'm going to figure out how to create a show on the internet. This was back in the early 2000s, and I built a TV studio in this room that I'm in right now. I called it Webovision. And it was it's been credited quite in a high profile way by Joe Rogan recently, is kind of credited it as being the very first podcast, And, Joe Rogan came up here in the early days and he talks about this on the show. I'm not making it up. I'm saying it because I love Joe Rogan and he's had me on recently. Frankly, it's really pretty much the last time I left my house was to go do Joe Rogan's podcast about 3 months ago. And he sort of credited it as being what made him realize that he could build a TV studio in his house and not have to be beholden to the sort of the powers that be, and go do it on your own. And look what's happened to him. So that was kind of out of the box thinking and figuring out a way to do something. And if a door closes here, go look for another. And I did that for many years. And then I decided, I wanted to take the show on the road and get back into doing stand-up. And I threw myself into that for the last 10 years. And now I'm doing a combination of both. I'm obviously not doing stand-up right now because of the pandemic, but that'll come back. But, like I said, I'm a kind of a geek with technology and computers and samplers and drum machines and microphones and video cameras and all of that stuff, editing video. I just love it. I find it very relaxing, actually, just to sort of be able to sit by myself and work on music or edit a video or shoot a video. I like figuring out all the technology, and there's so much new technology coming out all the time that it's sort of really kind of exciting to see what the new stuff is, the new gear is. I think I'm about to go get a really cool drone, which I've never really used before. But I'm going to go get a really cool drone, and I'm going to start making these films on this road trip that I'm going to be taking, where I'll be shooting these sort of social media films of me traveling through some national parks by myself, I'm actually going to be getting a new dog this week. I had 2 Siberian Huskies for 15 years. I've been dogless for 3 years, and I'm just kind of the isolation's getting to me. So I've got a nice dog that I'm going to be getting, and I'm reading John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie, about him traveling across America in a van with a poodle, and I'm building this podcast studio in the van, and we're going to go out on the road and make some really amazing television and radio, and as I travel around the country. It's going to be pretty exciting.
And what do you hope to get from that experience?
Well, first of all, I want to get out of the house. Like I said, I live in Los Angeles. I live, in the Hollywood Hills here, where I do have a little bit of outdoor space and a nice view, and I'm able to kind of have some outdoor space, which I feel fortunate about. But I want to be able to go walk out and take a walk in the mountains or in the forest and not be surrounded by people. I'm very cautious about my health. So I do, just on a personal level, I want to get out and do something. I've been cooped up for too long here during this thing, but technically I'm challenged by the idea of building this studio in a van, and I feel like we're moving into a new era in our world, where even though this pandemic will come to an end at some point, there may be others, and I just want to be kind of more prepared and ready to be able to be mobile at any time. And so I'm getting this vehicle that's going to have battery power and solar power, and in a way be able to it's my bug out van. I'll be able to sort of jump in it and take off and live, live off the grid, at least long enough to be able to get to somewhere where I need to get to, without having to check into a hotel. I'm not planning on checking into a hotel the entire trip. I'm not planning on going to a restaurant. I've got cooking and refrigeration and all the things I need to be able to live in this van for an extended period of time. So it's exciting, and I love outdoors, and I love camping. And listen, I'm going to develop some television and film projects around this idea, and that's exciting for me too. And so I've got lots of ideas that I'm creating. I like interviewing people. I like doing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to go out on the road and meet amazing people. Not going to meet so many people now. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm just going to get more into just the technical aspect of running the van and getting out on my own. But when the pandemic's over, I like the idea of going around the country and exploring the world and meeting people and interviewing people. And it's something that I'm really excited about. I'm probably leaving it in about a month or less. The van is getting finished now. We're doing some customization to it to make it work. And people will be able to watch on my YouTube channel on youtube.com/Tom Green, or on my website, tomgreen.com, or on Instagram and Twitter. They'll be able to follow along with my journey and follow me there and subscribe. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
It sounds like it will be. It sounds like the perfect vehicle for you, literally.
So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, I know people can't see the Zoom call, but you see my Ottawa Senators jersey on the wall behind me.
Yeah.
Sweater, not a jersey. It's a sweater, the hockey sweater. I've been living in the States too long, calling a hockey sweater a jersey. But regardless, you see my Ottawa Senators hockey sweater on the wall, framed, signed by the, I think it's the 1999 team. And the Sens, they sent me that. Probably, you could see there's that's the 1990. That actually be the 2000 team. I
can see Daniel Alfredson's signature there, number 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Senators sent that to me when I was actually in hospital with cancer.
Oh.
So they sent that to me, and it was very nice. So go Sens.
Right on. Tom,
yeah.
I have a lot of respect for what you do, and we are blessed by your comedy and all the creative energy that you put into your work. I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and I appreciate coming on your show. Always love to talk to you, and congrats on what you're doing. That's amazing, and I'll see you. I'll see you next time I'm up in Ottawa. Maybe we can grab a social distance beer there, eh? We'll get her done there, bud.
Well, I look forward to seeing the van pull into Ottawa. I'm expecting live TV coverage when that van is entering our city.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I might just sneak in and go into quarantine.
I've had a lot of great conversations over the last 20 years with Tom Green, but I really enjoyed that one. Obviously, Tom is incredibly funny and creative, but I also took a lot from what he said about his cancer special, which, by the way, you can watch on YouTube. You can check out Tom's adventures from his road trip across America on his website, tomgreen.com, and you can follow him on Twitter and Instagram. A big thank you again to Tom Green for joining us on Digging Deep. And once again, if you enjoyed this episode, please review it. Please share it with your network. That's going to help us produce more great episodes like this one. And if you want to start digging deep into topics and lessons like this, then please subscribe to our weekly newsletter and read my blog at letsdigdeep.com. That's letsdigdeep.com. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time.